A reading from Roar of Honor, written by Blaine Lee Pardo, read by the Dapper Bard. Another gust of wind buffered the last flickers of their small fire, which began to smoke as it died. There was little left to burn. Now, with the day starting, they did not have much time if they were ever going to do what they came for. There was no loss of honor in failing to kill a ghost bear during a clawing, but Angela Becker was not one given to surrendering an ideal. Trying to flush out one of the mighty creatures seemed impossible. The ghost bear was notorious for the way it hid itself in the massive snowdrifts, patiently waiting for its prey to come to it. There had to be another way to end this ordeal. Otherwise, she and Sprange would die here in the cold. Her mind played over everything she knew about the legendary ghost bears as she fought back another wave of shivers. They were hunters, powerful, white-furred creatures that stood over 5 meters when they rose to strike. The cold did not bother them. They ruled these pitiless mountains where they managed not only to survive, but to thrive. It was said they could smell blood for kilometers and would hunt their prey by smell alone. Then the idea came to her. It was a dark thought, one that would ask great sacrifice on her part. Honor was at stake, and for Angela Becker, little else mattered. From her earliest days in the Prowling Bear Sibco, she had been steeped in the idea sacrifice was expected from a warrior for the sake of glory or victory, and she resolved to win the honor of slaying a ghost bear. Silently, with great care, she wedged the shaft of her spear into the earthen floor, then braced it securely against a large rock protruding from the ground. The sharpened tip pointed towards the opening of the cave. "What are you doing, Angela?" Sprange asked weakly. She did not look at him, too busy testing the shaft of the spear to be sure it would hold against any weight brought to bear against it. "I am going to kill a ghost bear," she said finally. "Is one coming?" There was no fear in Sprange's voice. He sounded almost relieved. He would not survive another encounter with one and had resigned himself to death. It was the way of the warrior, and for a warrior to die during the perilous clawing ritual did not bring shame. She looked back at him. "One will," she said, drawing her utility knife. The blade shimmered in the dying light of the fire, and she stood silently, looking at it for a moment. She then stepped just to the edge of the cave opening, her feet crunching on the snow. With one sweeping move of the blade in her left hand, she severed the 4th and 5th fingers of her right. Angela screamed, but it was more the fierce howling of an animal than the sound of pain. Blood sprayed in the air and against the cave wall. She felt a warm rush suffuse her body. Then she doubled over in agony. The knife slipped from her fingers, and almost instantly was buried in the snow piling up at the cave entrance. She drew her small laser pistol and fired at the cut place on her hand. A wisp of smoke brought the smell of burning flesh as she cauterized the wound. She wailed again, less loudly this time, but now it was in pain. With her good hand, Angela picked up the 2 severed fingers and tossed them out into the snow. She half staggered to the back of the cave, where she had braced her spear. Her breathing was rapid and left clouds of steam in the air as she fought back the agony in her hand. "It is only a matter of time now," she said, standing to her full height, as if to tower over her own pain. Her blood would be the bait. "We will both die here," Sprange said. She looked at him and smiled. "There is no fate more fitting for 2 ghost bears, Quiaff." For the first time since he'd been mauled, Sprange smiled. "F." The minutes passed slowly. Then suddenly, the cave entrance darkened as a shape loomed before it. Angela lowered her stance slightly, breath still ragged, heart pounding through every part of her body. The great ghost bear lumbered into the cave, its bulk just barely able to fit. It was oddly silent as it came, as ghostly as its name. It was enormous, and its white fur looked silvery by the firelight, especially around its neck, a sign of its age. The bear spotted its prey at the rear of the cave and seemed to explode with a roar that shook the very rock walls around them. Angela did not flinch. She focused on the eyes of the ghost bear, staring deep into its soul. For the creature to have lived so long, it was indeed one of the greatest of its kind. It stared back at her, not like an animal, but like a fellow warrior, taking the measure of his foe. It took a step forward, then seemed to coil back slightly. She knew what it was doing. The great ghost bear was preparing to spring. Angela lowered herself slightly and reached out to where she'd rigged up her spear. The ghost bear did not hesitate. It leapt with a speed and agility that seemed impossible for a creature of its size. It came right for her, its eyes still locked with her own. It was as if this most magnificent of beasts was leaping at her very soul. In that instant, she angled the spear directly at the leaping bear, keeping the base of the shaft still anchored against the rock. The ghost bear, caught in mid-flight, impaled itself on the spear, which drove straight through its body and out its back. Time seemed to move slow, and Angela's awareness of the moment became a blur. Sounds in the cave were muffled, a dull roar in her mind. She did not remember rolling, but somehow came up beside the great creature as it lay dead between her and Sprange. I have mixed feelings on the MechWarrior series. Some of the books are pretty good, some of the books are not great. It's an odd little series, but unlike many of the other BattleTech books, they tend to focus on small units battling against usually pirates, in this case clanners, which is a nice change, as many books have an over-reliance on politics, oftentimes written poorly, or long drawn-out plots of intrigue, which oftentimes don't have payoffs worthy of the journey. However, I chose Roar of Honor because it is one of the best books in the MechWarrior series, and it is a good starting point for anyone curious about reading a book focused on the clans. The novel follows Angela Becker as she is given a brand new command, the Stalking Bear Trinary of Delta Galaxy's 8th Bear Cuirassiers. The unit is sent to a boring garrison position because the unit is your typical ragtag group made up of oddballs, discipline cases, and people right on the edge of earning Soloma. In other words, they're sent there to be kept out of the way. This leads us into a little training arc where we get to know the various members of the team, and we see the development of tactics under Angela Becker. However, Clan Wolf shows up, ready to conquer the world. They have to go up against the Bloodied Wolves Trinary of the 7th Battle Cluster of Gamma Galaxy. This leads to a battle of hide and seek. The story progresses with both sides taking losses, but of course, this wouldn't be a proper novel unless we get a nice third act twist. And when it hits, it's pretty good. It causes Angela to come up with a unique strategy in order to deal with the new situation. But it also feels like this battle is rushed, and another chapter of the fighting in order to resolve some character storylines would have really been nice. In addition to that, at our epilogue, it feels like it's just rushing through it really quick. It's like, hey, the movie's over, go home. And that's rather unfortunate because as much as I enjoyed the story, I would have liked a little bit extra about what happened to the characters after the events of the battle. The book's story feels like a pretty good action movie, but much like a proper action movie, it just kind of fades out after the good guys win, when it feels like there's a lot of stuff still left unresolved. And unfortunately, there is no sequel to this book that I know of. When it comes to themes, we have two that stand out. The first is teamwork. This is fairly well done. I mean, we get the training chapters where we're learning how to become a team. Then as they fight the wolves, they have to actually rely on teamwork or all be slaughtered. And this is kind of the typical thing for the ragtag group of soldiers have to pull together to take on the more powerful force. Though it is cliche, it does work for the sake of this action movie-esque story. The second one is the meaning of honor. It is interesting to see just how the members of Clan Wolf and the members of Clan Ghost Bear view honor in very different ways. how Angela Becker has a draw towards, I need to be this honorable person, I need to complete the clawing, I need to bring these disparate people together, I need to protect this world. When in reality, her garrison isn't important enough that she could have prevented the sacrifice of her soldiers by just sacrificing the world. But she would then lose honor because she ran away from a stronger opponent. There's also discussion about dying with honor, and several characters will talk about this throughout the course of the story, and this is fine, but it's nothing special. It feels like a little extra effort could have been put into the discussion about honor, or we could have possibly had another theme tying the two core themes together. But we don't really have that. When it comes to characters, we really have two main characters, and everyone else kind of falls into a generic cliche category. Our first person to talk about is Angela Becker. She's a very stubborn woman. She is a skilled soldier, willing to sacrifice anything in order to achieve her goals, and learning maybe that's not the best idea. She is a good leader who somehow keeps her troops together, despite their very disparate personalities, and she does have a slight character arc, as I mentioned earlier. Not a bad protagonist. Angela overall, not terrible, but nothing you haven't read in a previous BattleTech book. Dirk Raddick is the commander of the Wolves. He is your typical aggressive clanner who just wants to fight all the time, and I believe in honor until it is not really useful to me anymore, and then I'm gonna just go and break the rules in order to win. He very much comes off like a generic bad guy who is just, I like to conquer, I like to kill, mwah ha 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 ha. Interestingly enough, Dirk Raddick would continue in the lore of BattleTech. He does show up in several sourcebooks as an important commander within the Wolf military, meaning the villain of the story is more important than our protagonist. The one thing I did like about these two characters is that they do function as foils, especially on the concept of assertive leadership versus aggressive leadership. And the book very much leans in one direction over the other, showing that Angela's care for her soldiers provides more loyalty and more willingness to make sacrifice, rather than Raddick's use of intimidation, which makes his troops fear him, but not necessarily be willing to throw their lives away because he says so. Now, we have a lot of secondary characters that play a major role, though unfortunately, even the ones that have point of views in the story don't really come off as much more than the cliche they begin as. Constant Sang is essentially the XO of the team. He's a fairly brave leader, he feels bad when his soldiers die, and he's kind of bland. He's just kind of like, hey, I'm military commander who cares about his men. No! You can't die! Everybody liked you! You've seen him in about 100 military movies. Then we have Bethany. She's your typical hot-blooded warrior girl who's like, I'll follow my own rules and my own path to earn my honor. Essentially the not team player who ends up being slowly but surely forged into a team player, kind of. Her arc really doesn't quite conclude because she gets wounded. So, yeah. We have Dolph, who is a character I really wanted more screen time for. Or book time? Either way. He is essentially right on the edge of becoming a Saloma. He wants to die with honor, and he continuously talks about how his squads in the past have died. He's like the sole survivor guy. He wants to die as an honorable soldier and not live out his life as an old man. And his arc is basically forgotten by the end of the book. In fact, Dolph ceases showing up after a certain point. As far as I know, he didn't die, because if he did die, there would be something written saying, Dolph got the honorable death you sought, but we lost a valuable ally. And there's really nothing like that in the book. Grigori is your other stereotypical, I'm a free birth, but I think trueborns are arrogant jerks and I'll punch them in the face just to prove how good I am. What makes him a little more unique is he takes the cliche role of the snark guy. He's always throwing jabs at everybody in kind of a playful, silly way. This causes antagonism between him and Bethany, and a little bit of antagonism with any of the other true births, but at least in the battle where Bethany gets injured, you can see that he actually genuinely cares about his teammates. Neda is a former Nova Cat who now serves with the Ghost Bears. She is the very stereotypical Nova Cat who's like, the stars have shown me the future that's coming, the battles that must be fought under the moon during the autumn twilight. And you're like, okay, cool. She primarily exists to give Angela a very different point of view, to kind of say, hey, spirituality on the battlefield is kind of a thing, and Angela starting to kind of believe her by the end of the book. It's not really resolved in any way that expands Angela as a character, nor does Netta grow in any kind of unique ways either. She's just kind of there to be the spiritual member of the team. Finally, we have the other members of Clan Wolf. And the fact that I blend these together into a blob goes to show you how little characterization any of them got. They barely have personalities. One of the few point of view characters we get from Clan Wolf is Radix XO, who solely exists just to show how much of a jerk Radix can be. She's just kind of there to follow his orders. That's kind of it. Not a great character, and is indicative of some of the flaws in the character writing. Blaine Lee Pardoe has referred to himself as being a beer and pretzels sci-fi writer, and I think this book is a prime example of that. The writing works just well enough to make you care about these character cliches, but it still features those cliches. The plot is fairly predictable, but there are a few twists and surprises here and there, which does make it a more enjoyable read than a simple, straightforward story. As I said, it comes off like a really good action movie. You've seen all these action cliche characters, you know that they're gonna have a big, huge, final, epic battle at the end, and you're there for the ride. You're there for the action and the adventure. What matters is that you had a fun adventure with some generally likable characters. And I believe that is the author's intention when writing the story. It's a fun, fast read, which doesn't ask too much of your brain power. Just sit back and enjoy the roller coaster. And sometimes that's the kind of BattleTech book you're looking for, rather than your more dense and heavy political drama or spy thriller. Overall, I consider this a fairly mid outing for Blaine Pardoe. It's not a bad book, it's not a good book, it just kind of is. Yet, being a fun adventure has its own value, which will make this a read many fans of Ghost Bear will probably sit down and enjoy. My final verdict is 3.5 out of 5. The story has some good build-up, some fun fights, and some interesting twists. The themes are very simple, they are well handled, but nothing special. The characters are the weakest point of the entire book. They have very limited character development, and as I've said multiple times, they are all generally cliches. What hurts it even more is that a lot of the character arcs don't get properly completed, and that's rather unfortunate. However, the writing is fast-paced, exciting, and fun. This is just ragtag team goes to planet, fights rivals. Simple, easy, fun. And that's kind of what makes this a great clan adventure. Even though you do have a lot of your clanner cliches in it, it's a great way to go through a clan story without having it bogged down in all the terminology and the long-term lore or the inter-clan drama. This is my Trinary is fighting your Trinary, let's go. And you know what? I liked it. The one thing I think I might say is that mid Pardoe is better than many BattleTech writers at their best. And if Mr. Pardoe ever hears this, I hope he takes that as the compliment I meant it to be. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. I have a couple other book reviews. I don't do these as often as I should, even though I'm almost constantly reading. But if you want to see more book reviews, please let me know in the comments. Please like and share this video. And also, let me know what your favorite Blaine Pardoe book is. I think mine is Call of Duty, though I do love the Archer Cristofori trilogy as a whole. Until next time, I'm the Dapper Bard, and I'll see you at the tavern.